Thank you and good morning. You know, life used to be very simple. If you think back to how it used to be in our own home, we used to have a fairly disconnected life. I mean, if you think about it, if you wanted to watch television, you had a choice of maybe 4 or 5 channels. And stream was something that happened in the garden rather than in the home. In fact, the number of connected devices we had was maybe just one. And that was a modem that used to sit in the corner of the living room or in a bedroom where you'd maybe be on for maybe an hour or so before you'd be screamed down to switch it off. And if we fast forward only just a few years later, we now have a multitude of devices connecting every single aspect of what we do. If you want to switch the heating on, use your phone. If you want to control your oven from when you're outside, again, you can connect in from outside. Every single thing you can think of now has an IP address. In fact, I saw recently that a proof of concept now has developed a pregnancy test that will live tweet the result for you. Absolutely true. The number of devices we have in our home have now exploded. And I remember I asked this question to an audience once, and the record I have is somebody that had 200 connected devices in their own home. What surprised me more than anything is he's still married. But what do these devices do? From a television to a games console to your music system, we've now invaded our home with what I would argue are feature-rich devices, but also sensors that listen and collect and understand everything that you and your family are talking about, every single thing that we're doing. Even our own cars now have millions of lines of code and are fully connected. But I think the impact to all of this is something rarely understood. In fact, we've had multitudes of examples. For example, baby monitors, which can be compromised, to refrigerators being hacked. And by the way, when I started in cybersecurity, I never thought I'd be talking about refrigerators that can be hacked. It's completely new to me. But all of these devices introduce, in my mind, risk into your lives. Some of those risks are borne out by the fact that the companies themselves producing these devices simply don't care about security and privacy. So what you're getting is you're getting devices that can be easily compromised. But the other challenge that we face, and I think perhaps something that people rarely understand, is that these devices collect information and understand everything about us. And we've taken cybersecurity as a technology discipline, but the reality is that the impact of security and privacy has far more wide-reaching impact than we give it credit for. Now, every presentation I ever do, I always put up this slide. And this slide really emphasizes the work, or really security and privacy, and what the impact is. There was a ransomware attack called WannaCry a number of years ago. And as a result of this fairly surreptitious piece of ransomware, the NHS, the National Health Service in England, suffered catastrophic attack. And individuals like you and me were turned away from accident and emergency. Their operations were cancelled. If we failed to address the security and privacy considerations, this is not going to be the sole case study that we talk about. There will be a multitude of case studies, specifically showing the impact that it has on our everyday lives. Okay. And not just the everyday impact on our lives and the medical environment, but the threat of not having secure systems, not having privacy integrated at the heart of what we do, will mean that the economic impact to all of us will be felt. You know, it's ironic that I'm in Germany today because a study that we did with CSIS, a think tank based out in DC, showed that the economic impact of cyber crime was the highest in Germany than anywhere else in the world. And it was approximately 1.6% GDP. Now, that number may not mean anything to you, but what it means is that that's an impact on your ability to be able to get a job. That's an impact on the ability for this country to thrive economically, because that money is leaving the shores of Germany and going elsewhere. And so what do? We talk about this issue of cybersecurity. We know that it's a concern. We see the headlines every day. And do we as consumers value our personal data? I was at a shopping center in London about 2 years ago, and there was a company giving away free chocolate. But it's not free. None of this is free. If you use social networks, it's not free. Because just like in the chocolate example, this company wanted all of your personal data in exchange for free chocolate. And I remember asking the company at the time, because I have children and they love free chocolate. And I asked them and I said, what do you do with this data? And they showed me a privacy policy that was like a scene from Harry Potter, because there was cobwebs and dust balls and nobody had actually gone to read this. And yet the queue for people giving away their data was 40 to 50 deep. I would argue today that the actual value of personal data is at its highest. And if you want an example of that, ask yourself, how can a company like WhatsApp, with very, very limited revenue, sell to Facebook for $19 billion? It's because data is the new oil. And we've heard that before, but data is the new currency. Now, my daughter will tell me Bitcoin is the future. And I would argue that actually I think it's data. You know, we're seeing people focus upon Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies as the future, and the reality is that it's the Wild West out there. And we're seeing companies jump onto this bandwagon to monetize people's lives through cryptocurrency. And my favorite example of the Wild West was there was a cryptocurrency that actually had a developer, and you can tell that's Ryan Gosling. And yet, the consumer world at large had no idea, didn't even bother to look at the website or even question why Ryan Gosling was listed as an experienced graphic designer. And this company received hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of investment. Individuals are making money on the back of really a lack of due diligence. And whether that lack of due diligence exists in the cryptocurrency world or whether it exists in the personal data world, we have to accept the fact that large companies and scammers are making money from everything that we do. Okay, sorry. So what's the net result of all of this? What can you do? What should we be doing? And why does this really matter? On the back of these headlines, on the back of these major hacks, on the back of these vulnerabilities that are released, there are real people losing money. This particular individual lost all of their family's money day trading using cryptocurrency. With the case of WannaCry, there are real-life people that were taken or had operations booked and were turned away. Or companies that were hacked and, as a result of them being compromised, weren't able to reinvest the money that they would have. In other words, impacting the jobs and the livelihoods of what we do. Cybersecurity is seen as an outlier in the technology industry. It's seen very much as an afterthought as to what we do. And yet I would argue it's the single most important topic that we have. It's the single most important topic we have because Firstly, it's the foundation of what we do. And if you don't believe me, ask yourself a question. They're going to be having self-driving cars on the market within 12 to 24 months. How many of you have the confidence to go out and be the first person to buy that car? How many of you are willing to put your family in the back of a vehicle to drive 70 miles an hour and rely upon the code to keep you safe? And for those of you shaking your head, which I think there's a few of you, you don't have a choice, because the person driving next to you on the motorway may well be in a self-driving car. And so we're going to introduce risk regardless of whether you like it or not. And we have to accept the fact that there are adversaries out there that are doing everything they can to try to manipulate the system. And I was reminded of this myself during the vote of Brexit, where we have a nation state out there looking to go out and compromise everything that we hold dear. And I have to question whether we're leaving the European Union fairly or not. And I would argue perhaps not. You know, I often ask people the question, which is, if Twitter and Facebook weren't around, would Great Britain still be in the European Union? I don't know the answer to that, but I know for a fact that when Twitter disabled 8 million accounts, I know that would have had an impact. This is a quote taken from Tim Cook, and it really kind of summarizes the whole talk. You are a product. Your data is a product. And when you go out and buy a IoT-connected device and put it into your own home, what you're doing is you're allowing third parties access into your life. I remember I went for dinner at a friend's house, and we got given a gift. And it was one of these smart connected devices. It might have been the Google or the Alexa. And I left it packaged up on my dining table, ready to sell on eBay, because I don't want a microphone constantly listening to what me and my family do. And I went to work, and I came back that evening, and it wasn't there anymore. And I could hear the children upstairs saying, "Hey, Google, tell me a joke." And I was proud because they managed to set it up without me. But again, I was scared. I thought, well, where does this lead to? Do I really want a microphone constantly on in my daughter's room? My answer was no. Now, I'm not saying we absolutely should reject these devices, but what we need to do is we need to go into this world with our eyes open. If you as a consumer want to have these devices and want to have the features, then by all means, do that, but accept the fact that these devices will listen to everything you do. There's a lot of discussion that people don't care about privacy. But I would argue that's the opposite. When we did analysis into the Cambridge Analytica scandal, we found that people really did care, and in fact, the Delete Facebook campaign trended higher than Take a Knee. So people do care about their personal data, people do care about their privacy, and people do care about their family's safety. But in the world of digital, it's difficult to draw an analogy, because are they really in danger when they're in their own room? We head first into this world of IoT really unaware of what the impact and implications are. We have smart meters that can listen to what everybody does in their own home, what devices you have in your lives. You know, this is a map from a smart meter, and using a technique called non-intrusive activity load monitoring, we can determine when you're home, when you start the washing, when you put the kettle on. Almost every electrical device in your home constantly monitored and managed. I didn't sign up to that. Nobody asked me if that was okay. But nobody's going to listen to me. But they'll listen to the market. And the only way that we're going to be able to get what I believe is the 3 tenets of privacy that we need, which is transparency, informed consent, and value, is if we as a market stand up and say, that's not okay. My ask of you is really very simple. If you are comfortable and are happy for large corporations to put devices in your own home, not tell you what they do with the data and monetize it, let's continue as we are. The company VTech, which produced children's electronic toys, were compromised, and they amended their privacy policy that said, we're not responsible if we get hacked. You're responsible. If you're comfortable with that as a future, please proceed. If you don't want security and privacy at the heart of every single device, and by the way, cars, airplanes, lorries, all of these devices are becoming online, then we continue as we are. But that's not what I want. That's not why I'm here. I'm asking each of you to stand up and say, no. Security and privacy should be the foundation of every single device, every single system. And if you begin to ask the question, maybe we can make a change. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj. We're going to take a question or two from Slido, our question and answer platform. The first question is, do you use social media yourself?
I use Twitter, as my handle was up there earlier, and I use LinkedIn.
Okay.
That's it.
So if you're using Twitter with us today, you can use the hashtag TOA19 to join the conversation. Maybe Raj will find you, maybe he won't, maybe you'll find Raj online. And the next question is, how do we protect our data and ourselves better? What can individuals do?
Well, I think one of the things that I talked about was just asking the question. You know, like each of you have a smartphone, every single person has a multitude of apps. What do those apps do with your data? Where do they send it? Who do they share it with? And I think the same question could be taken about security, which is everybody thinks security is difficult, but it's really not. The majority of breaches use compromised credentials. You know, use strong passwords. Don't use the same password for every site. You do the common sense things that you do in everyday life in your digital world as well.
Thank you, Raj.
Thank you.